like, I don't know, let's say pasta carbonara, 200 years ago or 300 years ago, it wasn't. So recipes like language and culture and everything, ways people paint, ways people do everything evolves over time. And it's, if there's a recipe, as they do in Italy, that let's say a town highly values, like amatrice, and they have the pasta alla matriciana. So they have actually registered that recipe so it remains kind of solid in time and will always be a recorded way that they believe is the way it should be done. But then you drive just a little ways away to Rome, and we do a matriciana in a different way, adding onions. And they think that's atrocious, but I love it that way. So that's sort of the thing, to mutually respect the different recipes and kind of take joy in the diversity. Wouldn't you say that's a good approach?
I do, for sure. I mean, as a content creator and a recipe developer and a chef, I have always been about innovation and evolving and trying to look at recipes in a different way. And believe me, I can absolutely understand respecting the classical way of doing things. And I do that a lot, but I also innovate and I also change and evolve, the original recipes into new flavors. And I think that is okay as well. I think it's generally accepted by most people, but not necessarily the people, like you said, in the towns where some of those, where the countries where a lot of those dishes originated.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, pasta carbonara, I really love the way it's classically made now. And we were saying last night that even if you make like so many changes to a recipe that it almost becomes a different recipe, maybe it's better to give it another name. I mean, I make carbonara with, please forgive me, with shaved artichokes. It's delicious. But if I like modified almost every ingredient or process, then maybe I'd give it another name,
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand that. I mean, I have tinkered around with carbonara. I feel like we're starting off talking about one of the hot ticket recipes out there, because carbonara is actually very controversial. Lots of people do it the quote unquote wrong way. But yeah, I mean, I understand there are ways around it. You could always put carbonara, the word, in quotes, which is sort of common practice to kind of indicate that this recipe was inspired by the concept of carbonara, if you want to get technical.
I don't know why carbonara has become sort of the recipe that can't be touched more than others, but you're right. That does seem to be one of the ones that people like lose it if they touch it.
Yeah, I agree. I think because a lot of people don't understand what it was originally. See, the way I look at things are understand the rule before you decide to break it. And that's what I do with everything, whether it's a recipe or a culinary food safety thing in your kitchen. Like, understand why you're doing a certain thing, understand why things are that way originally. And then if you decide to change or break it, you understand what the ramifications are, and you can still do it with respect to the original, if that makes sense.
That's a great point. In fact, if you don't really understand what you're doing in the kitchen and how the ingredients work together, you might start to vary something when you haven't understood the initial thing. I mean, yeah, that's key. That's key.
Especially even like with making soup or making peppers and eggs. Like, there are shortcuts that I take. But if I were teaching someone or writing a recipe on my website or in my cookbook, I would not take those shortcuts, or I might mention them in the notes, but the recipe would be written as if somebody has never made that before. I could take a shortcut when I'm making it in my kitchen because I know it's okay to, because I have enough experience cooking and whatnot. But I know, the original way or how it should be done. And I also know that my shortcut is going to, have the same result.
Yeah, that's really true. Understand the rule before you break it. I like that. I'm going to write that down afterwards. But then just thinking about food and culture, and we're going to be doing another podcast episode tomorrow that this is sort of entry level food shaming because it's something that's done in Italy that's a little unusual, and you'll see. So that brings us into Italian American food. I mean, I'm so deeply attached to America and everything about it, and the same thing about Italy. You know, people who have moved away from Italy and they've taken their heritage and then they've adapted it according to the culture they've moved into, just from a cultural standpoint or an availability of ingredient standpoint. And sometimes it's something as simple as the translation and understanding of a word, like wedding soup. And I just understood fairly recently, I'm like, wedding soup? I mean, I've never heard of such a thing until I saw that the word was maritata. But you understood that, right, Michelle?
Yeah, in fact, I actually write about this in my blog post on Italian wedding soup. And I do call it Italian wedding soup because that is a common name here in America, and that is my audience. But I understand that the term wedding soup has origins in the fact, in the word maritata. I don't know if I'm saying that very well.
Which is married.
Which is married. So the idea is that the soup, it's the two main ingredients are, meat and greens. So the idea was it's called zuppa maritata, meaning married soup, really that it's a wonderful, beautiful marriage of flavors. Meat and greens go very well together, so it's called zuppa maritata. Somewhere along the line, and who knows how, that word sort of got translated into wedding soup. And a lot of people are very upset about that, especially in Italy. Like, what is wedding soup? We don't have this in Italy, wedding soup. So I don't know what you were making. Why are you calling it that? But the reality is you do. It's just called something different. And then something that's sort of interesting is it is served at a lot of Italian American weddings. I mean, I've had it many a time at my cousin's weddings as a first course. I don't think it's called wedding soup because it was served at weddings, but I think because it's called wedding soup by a lot of people.
Now people start to serve
people
it. Yeah.
Over the years started to serve it at weddings. And it's a lovely soup. Why wouldn't you? It's a beautiful representation.
Yeah, explain what it is, because
it's a brothy soup with the main ingredients are mini meatballs, escarole. Sometimes there's pasta in it. Many times there's not. And, it's if it's made the right way, it's a homemade meat stock, which might be chicken. It might be chicken and beef. And of course you have carrots, celery, onions, garlic, which is what most soups start off with. And those are the main ingredients. And then it's usually finished off with a good sprinkling of pecorino romano cheese. And then you call it a day. And then that is wedding soup. Wonderful.
So it could have happened initially just as many things got transmitted orally. So someone said maritata, another person understood, maritata's wedding. And
that's what I think. That's what I assume happened.
Well, and just like Cinderella. So Cinderella wore a glass slipper. Who in the world wears glass slippers? But actually, it was a French thing. And the word verre for glass is V-E-R-T. The word for fur is V-E-R-R-E. So it got told orally, and it was like a fur slipper back in the beginning. And it got
that. I did not know that.
But it's the same. Yeah. It's the same kind of a thing.
Yeah,
sure. Orally transmitting things. So I went to, speaking of weddings, I went to a family wedding just in the past few days. Went to the rehearsal dinner in an Italian restaurant. It was a really good restaurant. And they were all recipes that I didn't know, and I'd never actually even tasted before, that are considered Italian in the Italian American culture, but aren't Italian. So I'm
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think just before we get into the Italian American dishes that you had the other night, we need to understand, and this is my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, Italian American cuisine is its own cuisine. Obviously it is based on and it evolved on classic Italian dishes, and it evolved at the turn of the century, and then again in the 50s when there was 60s when there was the second diaspora of people coming from Italy to America. But it evolved over time from those immigrants and from the dishes that they made, and it turned into its own cuisine,
like Cajun.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay that there are dishes that are Italian American that are not made in Italy. I mean,
for sure.
Because it's a different, again, it's different. Of course, related,
Right, but they're very